Welcome to the Olentangy Local Board of Education regular meeting. Tonight is Thursday, June 14th. I cannot believe that. And we are in the Berlin Room at the Olentangy Administrative Offices. Mrs. Hatfield, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Bartz?
Here.
Mrs. Fiesel?
Here.
Mr. King?
Here.
Mr. O'Brien?
Here.
And Mrs. Patrick?
Here. Please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Now I will entertain a motion to approve tonight's agenda. So moved. A second?
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, Mrs. Hatfield, please call the roll.
Mrs. Fiesel?
Yes.
Mr. Bartz?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mr. O'Brien?
Yes.
And Mrs. Patrick?
Yes. Thank you. Guess that's me and my lengthy board report.
We are all looking forward.
Are you presentation and board report at the same time? Or did that get
Did
changed?
I skip something?
No, there's no
No,
presentation.
see, I had the old one.
You scared me.
Well, you can have all the time. I mean,
All
that's
right,
okay.
well, I brought you all a little gift tonight. I would like to share some literature with you, my fellow board members.
That's me. Sorry.
It's Mr. Ray.
That's me.
Who's doing that?
That's
Okay.
me. I'm sorry.
Thought we had a
Shuffling
ghost. And earlier this year, we had some students come and share their experiences with racism in Olentangy, a say something, do something. And you have to state it in order for it to be addressed. And I thought they were very, very brave in doing so. So tonight I wanted to share this with you. This is Liberty High School's last edition of this year's canon. And my daughter came home with her in her backpack. She didn't share it with me, of course. The neighbor talked to me about it. So I went digging and I found it. It's very well done. I highly suggest you take the time to look through it because these are students. This all came to be after Liberty High School lost a couple of their students to mental health issues this year. They put a venue together for kids to come forward and talk and process and share some experiences and take a look at potential solutions and really take the stigma out of speaking about mental health. So that's what this publication did, and I think it's like the first step into making it not so taboo. It's very impressive. Some of the writing is great, and I just think it's important that we keep that in the front of our minds, that this is one of the largest issues that our students are faced with today. There's 40% of kids have anxiety and or depression. So I'm grateful that we have a non-academic barriers to learning issue that we are addressing, and I'm really proud of these kids. I just thought this was a very impressive publication, and I wanted to share that with you. Which leads me to our next largest issue, and that would be growth in facilities. So on tonight's agenda, we will hear from Chief Academic Officer Jack Fetty, because growth is frequently at the top of our agenda and not forecasted to slow down for several decades. As I will remind the public that our forecasting has been within 1% each year. And with that said, the projections on target the age, wait, hold on, what the, they're not easy to predict the exact needs. They vary by, we're within 1%, but sometimes we're off a little bit on age or needs. And our classroom needs are always changing. Tonight we are going to discuss the topic of using some of our 2011 unused levy money and issuing some bonds. We will discuss that. We have put it on there. We're going to have a pretty deep conversation about it before we vote. But I think it's important that everyone know that all of us have attended meetings outside of our board meeting to understand the options, how much, what the costs are associated with those options, what really addresses our long-term needs as opposed to a short-term fix, because I don't think growth is, it's not going to slow down. So we have to look at this long-term and try to do as little redistricting as possible. Also on tonight's agenda, we have 6 board action items. Our 3-year agreement with the Olentangy Teachers Association, as well as salary contracts for non-union classified employees, non-union classified food service workers, district administrators, our superintendent and treasurer. We haven't met for about a month because we were busy with graduation and award ceremonies. I think it went really well. I personally loved being at the Schottenstein. I felt like we were big time. It was very nice. We did get some comments, and one of my suggestions for district leadership to consider going forward is put the kids in the front on stage. We can go anywhere, but the kids need to be up in front. I think some of them were on the opposite side of the stage as us and back. And
I mean the kids that are like valedictorian?
yes, in the class cabinet,
Oh,
and the
yeah.
officers, like,
Yeah.
they need to be.
Yeah, we can gladly sit
Yeah,
in the
we can
back.
sit in
No
the
one
back.
needs to see us.
That's what I think. I'm
Yeah,
okay
absolutely.
with that. So
Everyone agree? Do we have agreements on that? There's no wrong answer.
it's all about the kids.
It's not about us.
It's not about us. So that was exciting. I had a graduating senior, so it was even more exciting. So did Kevin.
It is as well, yes. Very excited.
Todd. So anyways, that is it for my board's president's report. Mr. Rafe.
All right.
Your superintendent report.
I like that suggestion, Mr. Patrick. That's the way we did it when I was principal at Liberty. Kids were up in the front row, but, you know, who's counting?
A lot of things happened when you were principal at Liberty.
It was, right?
Sometimes
So,
both
back to
ways
the
can
good
go.
things. Thank you and welcome, everyone. Since you just mentioned graduation, there's some pictures. We did have 1,472 new graduates. And just, again, to keep everything in mind, this year we anticipate about 1,388 kindergartners, but as we know, that's not a full class because some families choose all-day kindergarten. So first grade's looking like 1,500 or so, so larger than what's going out. And then next year's incoming ninth grade class is the largest in the district with 1,781 kids. So that will be a lot of hands to shake. Spring sports came to an end. I'm sure you have all heard and seen that Liberty High School's boys baseball team won a state championship, so congratulations to them and Coach Brenning. I'm sure they'll be here for our next meeting to be recognized. We had Orange senior Jaden Rogers win the state title in the 100-meter hurdles, and OHS senior Siobhan Sorensis won the state title in girls pole vault. She actually went after, she was at 13.3, she won it, probably broke the state record on that jump, but then had to try 13.6 to set the state record and didn't get it. So, but the state record's actually held by an Orange grad, Emma Watson.
Yeah.
It is.
So,
Yep.
yeah, got some great pole vaulters in this district. I want to congratulate Jack and his team for the efforts at Think Tank, held May 30th and 31st. Our participation every year goes up. We had 400 staff attend, and the feedback has been incredibly powerful. Mr. Pulfer, is that you in that picture? Wow. Hey, about that.
Who knew?
I don't know. Somebody must have known you were being here. So, anyways, congratulations. We're really excited about that professional development provided by our staff and the level of participation. These are very preliminary numbers, but the Ohio State test results are out. It does appear that our performance index has moved up from up to a 104.9. It was 103.7 last year. Again, these are based on Dr. Way's calculations, but as we know, he's usually pretty close. So we hope, anticipate they hold. Jack and his team are analyzing all of that data and devising plans to have some things addressed. We've got, as in all of our data, as we do every year, we got some things to celebrate and some things to work on. So principals are getting into all that data. We have two discussion items. Randy's going to present the calendar for 2019-20, and as we do normally at this time, there have been some changes that are in the recommended or in the OTA contract that you'll be approving tonight that affect that 2019-20 calendar. So Randy will highlight those, and then Jack's going to lead our elementary capacity discussion so we can make a decision and move forward with a plan to address our elementary capacity here in the district. So Moving on to other agenda items, obviously we have our collective bargain agreement with the Olentangy Teachers Association, and Ms. Eddy is here, and we thank her and her team for, once again, a very collaborative effort. What did we, 4 days this time? We had some good, some, I don't know, did we keep track of who stormed out more, postured more? Nah. We had, it was great. It was a great collaborative effort, and we understand our need to continue to be as fiscally responsible as possible, as we are always looking ahead to our next ballot issue, and again, given the amount of state funding we get and our reliance on our local property tax payers, we got some, we think, very good insurance changes in this contract that will then spread throughout all of the other associations and all of the other non-union workers, administrators, and non-union workers. So those changes will lead us to a more sustainable health care program. So I think it's a great, fair deal all across the board. We want to have a great compensation package because we want to be able to attract and retain the best talent out there. So as Mrs. Patrick mentioned, there are salary increases for all the rest of the employees who aren't affected by that are not in bargaining units that we're recommending. Mrs. Hatfield will talk more about the treasurer action item, so I won't steal that thunder. We have new administrative employments. Our five of our elementary assistant principals are on the agenda, in addition to some curriculum replacements. And then the final 3 large purchases for Berlin, some curriculum materials, and all of the band equipment are in that package. So I think we're done with what the board needs to approve. Right, Mr. Gordon?
Yes, sir.
Yes. And then there's 2 final agenda items to recommending the approval of Fanning and Howie as our architect of record and the classroom additions that are going to be a part of the discussion. This one, as Mrs. Patrick mentioned in her, we are going to have a discussion on this, just again for the public and transparency. We put together these agendas, we have discussion on these items on the agendas, and then you as a board take action on those items. We want to have the agendas prepared to move forward. I don't want anybody to think that we put things on agendas that are rubber stamped. But our discussion tonight will lead to decisions, and because of the timing of our meetings and how quickly we need to move on these things, so we do have to have an architect of record, and then we want, if we do decide to move forward with classroom additions and architectural engineering services, it's necessary to move forward with that. If we go in a different direction, then these items simply won't be passed, and we move on. So just don't like the perception that we're just rubber stamping things, because there's a lot of work that goes into getting these agendas put together. And then finally, a couple important dates. Our next board business session is also our second student recognition session, so that we are hosting that at Olentangy High School. And then our board business session, our next board business session on July 9th. That, again, for the public, that was a change. So we move ahead of the July 10th deadline that is where people can resign by July 10th. So, questions? Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Hatfield, your treasurer's report, please.
Good evening. So we have several items on the agenda for approval tonight. We have appropriation changes and minutes that are before the board. Those are standard monthly items that we bring forward. Again, appropriation changes are simply budget changes. Nothing that's an extreme material change, but we want to make sure we're following procedure and are compliant with those items. So they are before you for approval tonight. We also have an agreement with First Commonwealth Bank. And this is simply an update to our current depository agreement that we have with First Commonwealth. They are a good partner with the district and our major depository. And so we have the update to the agreement to comply with the Treasurer of State changes in the collateralization program. So it's just to make sure that that information is compliant and up to date. We also have several donations for recognition tonight. We have Arrowhead PTO that donated climbing walls, gaga pits, and soccer goals valued at over $12,000. Mr. Cato donated a trombone to Liberty Tree Elementary School valued at $500. We have 2 anonymous donations on the agenda this evening as well. $880 to Berkshire Middle School's DC scholarship trip and $4,500 to Berkshire Middle School's arts program. So we thank those individuals for those donations. We'd also like to thank our community for their in-kind donations with their time that they volunteer and work that they put in with our community. We really appreciate it. We also have on the agenda tonight, again, a bond resolution. And just as a quick recap from our previous discussion in May, that resolution is would fulfill the funding needed should the board want to work with the additions on the elementary capacity. So again, we don't have the rubber stamp with that, so to speak, but we wanted to make sure that the resolution was available. So as we walk through our discussion on elementary capacity tonight, we have the information ready to go for approval. The ballot item, or the resolution for that item, is at the 14.9. That's the full amount that's available of that voted authority, but the capacity needs would not necessarily require us to sell that full debt. So I wanted to make that distinction as well. But for compliance sake, we went ahead and had the resolution prepared at that full amount. Are there any further questions about those items? Yep.
Okay, so we have a couple of discussion, oh no, I'm sorry. Mrs. Hatfield, do we have any public participation this evening?
No, we do not.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to turn now to Mr. Wright, and he's going to present our 2019-20 school calendar.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Thank you for your time tonight. I wanted to bring you this draft of the calendar, and I know you have that in your support documentation. And for the public, they will be seeing a draft of this very soon online, and I'll be explaining that process a little bit later. The timeline, as we typically go, is later this year. We knew we were going into negotiations with our teaching membership, and we wanted to make sure that if there were contractual things that impacted our district calendar, we wanted to wait until that process had run its course so that we did not have to amend an approved calendar. So we pushed this process back approximately 3 months. We typically start this in February with an approval in March or April. So we waited until the tentative agreement, which you guys will review and vote on later tonight, was in effect. So should we reach agreement on the, or a passed vote on the tentative agreement, then we will move forward with this draft for public commentary beginning Monday, June 25th. And I will talk about that process at the very end of this presentation. So the next thing I want to talk about is this, this process. While you see a draft, this finished product that's a draft is a culmination of about a month of work and looking at several, at least 6 different models based on some of the historical facts that we have developed over the last several years that we look as anchors for our calendar. And among those are the start of the school year, what we do with maximizing instructional time in the first semester, how we look at our Thanksgiving, winter, and spring breaks, and how we want to maximize instruction in the second semester around when graduation, which is another anchor that we can't just move around arbitrarily, and balance that with all of the holidays that come up. So because in this negotiation season, we looked at an opportunity to work with our membership and provide an additional work day at the beginning of the school year. We do have a different starting date than has been typical in our district, which by date we mean day of the week. So our proposed calendar for students actually starts on a Thursday. It is in the 3rd week of August that we've been trying to anchor to. It is what we feel is as early as we want to go numerically by proposing a start date of Thursday, August 15th. And we spent a lot of time talking with principals and teachers about what those first 2 days look like with students. And there are a number of start of the year events that have to occur. Passing out textbooks, organizing classrooms, running drills, going over rules and procedures, running assemblies to explain the different things to students. So we looked at it and felt that with the additional teacher workday and what typically goes on with students in the first 2 days, that gives us a great first week of school with the teachers having 3 work days, then 2 with students, and then coming back that following Monday, we hit normal school as we know it for the foreseeable rest of that semester. So those conversations, and I'm pleased to announce that a big part of reviewing 7 drafts, it really comes down to Elaine Eddy and I taking a lot of feedback that she gets from those that she trusts across the district, and then I speak on behalf of the district leadership team, and we go through several drafts, and then we together arrived at what is before you today. So I am very proud of that partnership that I have with Elaine, and it's something that we're proud of that we're presenting to you. That said, we want to make sure we can do this as well as we can, and we want to make sure that we solicit all of the feedback. So quickly go through the other particulars of the calendar, and then finish with the community input procedure at the end. So as you saw, I talked about the beginning of the school year. Our typical days off or structure is standard throughout that first semester. Our typical Thanksgiving break, and then we try to maximize the instructional time through December before our winter break. So the last day of school for students there is December 20th. We continue to look at the break, trying to maximize it, but not impact instruction. So we try to give as long a break as possible, up to about 2 weeks, and then bring students back in a most efficient manner. So if we are, as we propose, we have a teacher work day the Friday before the end of winter break for students on Friday, January 3rd, and then students and staff together would start on Monday, January 6th for the second semester. Moving further along, we have looked at spring break, trying to be in that last week of March, so the proposed calendar shows up with the spring break there again. And we look at, our last thing is, okay, how do we finish up the school year? Again, in our conversation with Elaine, we look at, and I'll tie you back to that January work day, we can give our entire staff that January work day off, and everybody comes back on a work day, and then kids on a Tuesday, but that extends the calendar by a day, and that has our teachers coming back at the end of the year after Memorial Day and a 3-day weekend. So in our partnership, say that this is a better opportunity for everyone to run the calendar like this. One of our anchor days there is Sunday, May 17th, which is our graduation. Another anchor that we can't do anything about is advanced placement testing, which is the first 2 full weeks in May. So that would actually wrap up again right before graduation on this draft of the calendar. And we try to minimize impact to April because of all of our Ohio State tests. So you see that there's a lot of non-shaded or interrupted days. We want to make sure that those are available and flexible there. So the last thing that we try to do in this calendar is to make the 2 semesters as balanced as possible. There are 84 student days in the first semester and 89 in the second, which is as balanced as any of the 4 drafts that I've presented to this board in this role. So we're happy with that. And we're very comfortable with there being more in the second semester. We do understand we have all of the testing days. We acknowledge we may have inclement weather, and we lose days to calamity as well. So we're okay having more days in the second semester. We feel they typically balance out. So before I give the community input part, I want to open up for any questions or things that you want to clarify on this draft. Mr. Bartz.
Can we mark graduation on this calendar and put it on as one of your dates?
We can. We haven't typically.
Is the
because it's not a
signed?
district event. So we try to just, doesn't impact the entire district, where elementaries and middle schools.
Yeah.
So
just out of curiosity, I mean, if this is what people look at, it just I mean, I don't see any downside to it, but
Nope.
you don't have to do it just because I say so.
No, I'm explaining why it's not been there, so.
Because I get 500 calls from people that say,
Yeah,
when's
I've already
graduation?
had someone ask me
Yeah.
for this date.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean.
Duly noted.
Thank you. That's it. Other than that.
Because that contract is locked in through when with the Schottenstein?
I'm sorry?
We know what day
Schottenstein.
graduation is going to
5 more years.
be. Okay.
And we are the third Sunday in May on each of those contracted years with the Schottenstein Center. Ms. Fiesel?
On this calendar, when would you hold convocation? On the 14th of August?
Yes, the day before school.
Okay, just, I wanted to make sure that.
Yes, and part of the negotiated or the tentative agreement is that the open house is the
Right.
second workday, so that would be the Tuesday, which is the 13th. The 12th is it's just a teacher workday. We know so many of our staff members are in long before that,
Right.
prepping their rooms and getting ready. But that last day before parents start coming in on the 13th it's a day for them to be able to finalize all their preparation for the school year.
And I want to say, especially at the elementary level, that people walk in all the time and interrupt those teachers.
Absolutely.
And they're so
Because they're
sweet. They
trying to
never say
think-
no. They want the
yeah.
kids to be
Just-
comfortable,
yeah,
and
see the room.
they put in a lot of time ahead of.
Okay, any other questions?
Repeat that graduation Sunday.
Sunday, May 17th.
Third Sunday every year.
Anything else?
Well, look good.
Okay, then the final thing that I wanted to share, just the final part of the process. Per our policy, once we have presented a draft to the Board of Education, we will make that draft available to our community and staff for at least 30 days of opportunity for feedback. We will begin that process on Monday, June 25th. We anticipate keeping that open through the end of July with an approval at the early August Board of Education meeting. Our process this year is going to be slightly different. We're very excited to be starting a new partnership with a software group called Thought Exchange, and this group allows for feedback to be given on a very simplistic question. And it's essentially asking your thoughts on the calendar, but then what it does, it collects your thoughts and then asks you to rate the thoughts that other people have on a 1 to 5 stars system. So if we were to do that, and I would just give you that question, you would answer it yourself. What are your thoughts on the draft calendar? And then all of the thoughts, as many as you would like, that have been given before, you can star. Oh, I also agree with that. No, I don't agree with that. That's an incredible thought. 1 to 5 stars for every thought that anybody else has. And the metrics behind it will connect thoughts, develop themes, and mostly we want to look at this from a standpoint of we think about the calendar from our perspective, and we partner with Elaine and her group to make sure that we have additional input, but what could we be missing? And this is an opportunity that someone can have a thought about the calendar we haven't seen before or thought of ourselves, and that other people in the community can say, yes, we think about that too. And it's not additional comments, it's your thought, and then it's a rating system, and it allows us to look for trends that if there are things that we need to take a look at based on that feedback, that we might want to make a change. So we will be using that process, introducing it throughout next week so that our community is ready to go with that on Monday, June 25th. So I just wanted to share that. Okay? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, next we have Dr. Fetty for his update on facility capacity, or our elementary capacity.
Good evening. So at the last board meeting, Sharon Jurowitz and I presented to you the facility committee's recommendations for additions to our elementary schools, and you had asked that we come back with final decisions on the locations of those additions. And we met with the facilities committee on June 7th, and the principals of the 3 buildings on, or excuse me, the facilities committee on June 6th, and the 3 principals of those buildings on June 7th. And are very confident that Alum Creek Elementary School, Arrowhead Elementary School, and Wyandotte Run Elementary School are the 3 most ideal locations for additions due to their similar footprint.
Yep.
Their
Alum Creek, Wyandotte Run.
Alum Creek, Arrowhead,
Arrowhead.
and Wyandotte Run.
originals?
Due to their central locations on the east and west sides of the district, their similar footprint, which helps with cost, and they also have an additional playground from some of our other schools. So since we're going to be placing preschool there, that's only going to help us accommodate the additional students. So the Facilities Committee endorsed the plan, the leadership team has reviewed the plan, and we are confident that those 3 sites are the best options should we move forward with additions. Is there other information that I can provide you? Yes?
Will there be any other space added besides the classroom, like any storage space or any restrooms or?
Sure, there will be 6 classrooms in each edition, and each classroom will have a restroom in it to make it outfitted ideally for preschool classrooms.
Yep.
The edition will also have, each edition will have a, I don't know, I call it a utility closet. Is that a good? Standalone mechanical room, and a office space that can either be physically an office space or most likely a small group instruction room for our preschools. Do a lot of occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech therapy that needs a small group space, so that will be provided. There will be exits from the wing to the transportation pickup drop-off area. So it will be connected. It will be an extension of one of the wings in each of those schools. But as far as storage goes, there will be room for storage and casework within the classrooms. And that's something that the principals talked about as well. And as we progress through the design and construction phase, we'll continue to look at that.
Mindy, I'd like to make a comment. Clearly, I was thinking along the lines of Mark and Mindy with their comments at the beginning is something I wanted to share as well. This process has not been over a couple of weeks.
Right.
This has been a very comprehensive review, and I'm really pleased how it went. We had the Facilities Committee, they had a subcommittee, and Sharon, again, did a wonderful job of putting all that information together. We also met, and Roger and I attended those meetings. And we also had with the Finance Committee with Emily looking at all the ramifications, again, with all those volunteers, looking at the ramifications of costs and how that fits into a 5-year forecast. I've also been very pleased for some time now that Jack and Emily have attended these meetings to provide extra input along with the ongoing role of Jeff and with the input from Bruce. So that's been a wonderful addition to the review and the Facilities Committee meetings. And as everybody is aware, we've had at least 3, if not 4, solid presentations at these meetings. This has been a very comprehensive review. And another thing that I really was appreciated seeing as an evolution of the process was the shifting to looking at classroom needs and not just more of a specific building need. So again, as both of them said in the very beginning of the evening, this has been well thought out, a very comprehensive study.
What school year would the classrooms be available?
1920.
Yeah, we're talking about a pretty fast burn.
Yeah. So would there be new boundaries for elementary? We'll do it with existing boundaries?
But that's why we picked the schools we picked so that we could then, we'll mostly populate those with where, go ahead.
So we'll be moving to,
Sorry. Well done. Dr. Fetty.
we'll be able to move preschool classrooms into these wings to create some flexibility. So for example, on the west side of the district, Indian Springs, Scioto Ridge, and Liberty Tree will have preschool classrooms in this upcoming school year. So as attendance grows in those schools, we'll be able to pull the preschool classrooms into Wyandotte-Run to create extra space at Indian Springs, Scioto Ridge, and Liberty Tree, and the same idea on the east side. There also will be less, but some flexibility with the specialized learning centers. Those are, those, as you are aware, bring students from multiple attendance areas. We try to distribute them throughout the district in ways that balance them amongst the schools and are ideal for transportation, but they still provide some flexibility. If, for example, an elementary school needed an extra classroom, we could theoretically move a specialized learning center to one of the additions and create that classroom space in the school.
Any consideration for Meadows? They seem to be the most popular populated elementary.
Yes, Meadows is always one of our most populated. We certainly considered Meadows, looked at it closely as we did all of the school sites. The reason Meadows is not an ideal site is it's a pretty tight footprint, and I believe it's a wetlands area surrounding the school.
It's a retention, storm drainage retention area, and storm sewer was on the wrong side of the building, or sanitary sewer was on the wrong side.
Another reason that the square layout buildings was less ideal than the winged buildings is that you have to lose a classroom in order to add the extension. So the net classroom in those buildings would be 5 instead of 6. Each classroom matters.
Yep.
So for Bruce and Jeff, we know it's an aggressive schedule, so it's going to come back to us. We go out to bid. What's our confidence level that they'll open in 19?
I'd say our confidence level is pretty high. There's going to be lots of steps this summer. It is an aggressive schedule, but the work of the development committee and all the folks that Mr. King put forth to you has sped that up. So we're ahead of the curve, I would say, with this. The surveys have already been completed, so we have that information. As Mr. Fetty said, or Dr. Fetty said, we met with the principals already. They have a working idea of what's going to be happening here, so a pretty high confidence level that it'll be a busy summer.
Do we anticipate any issues with any of the townships on zoning?
Right.
That's the next step. I would say no, because we're not impacting those footprints very much. We're not taking out, you're taking out some of your front yard space.
Yeah, you're taking dirt.
But we're not taking out parking spaces. We're not interfering with any major traffic patterns on those sites. I think there's lots of things that have gone into those site selections, and I don't believe we'll be having big issues with them. We'll be reaching out to those folks, of course.
One of our biggest challenges is, as Bruce mentioned, was the sanitary, and picking the buildings we did and where the sanitary comes in was helpful. And other discussions with the county, with Berlin, we actually had a chance to run through that with them. So that was one of the bigger hurdles that we got out of the way before we finalized on site selection. So that really helped as well.
Anyone else have questions? I have one. Okay, speaking again about the what we're actually putting in addition, it's 6 classrooms that all have a restroom. And then just one other area, common area?
One office-sized area and one, I'm going to say utility closet again.
Yeah,
mechanical room, standalone mechanical room again.
So I have visited the preschools a few times, and they're busy. Their kids are always moving, and they're doing occupational therapy, they're doing physical therapy. There's a lot of like one-on-one things, and then they have their gross motor skill. And is that enough? Like, is that enough space for them? Because are they still going to be able to use any common area for gross motor skill?
Yeah, they will be able to. There's always restrictions with the rest of the building schedule and times that are good and times that are not good to use other open space. Gross motor can happen in the commons area anytime it's not lunch. During lunch, it can happen. So we're confident that the classroom space is sufficient and that the non-classroom space will be sufficient as well. It will never be, I think, ideal because the needs are always changing too. As we saw with Shanahan and the move to Shanahan, we had a very successful first year at Shanahan, but we're also looking at some minor changes that we can make to improve upon that. So we're always going to be, we have a continuous improvement mindset, and we're always going to be looking at ways to improve it, but I'm very confident that the design that we have is going to help us to run successful preschool classrooms in these facilities.
Wide hallways? Can they ride their bikes in the hallway?
They do.
Yeah, they do. And involving the principals already in the stage, Mrs. Worth, who's here, and Mrs. McMillan and Mr. Ross have been very helpful already in thinking through what will the interruptions be with the construction and the safety concerns. So they're going to be a part of that all along the way. They understand. They've all had preschools in their buildings before or currently, so they know what to expect with preschools and what additional preschools will bring additional preschool classrooms will bring. So a lot of that will also go to them to make those building level decisions about scheduling, storage space, because the preschool is not going to be isolated only in those 6 rooms. They're still going to be a part of the greater building, as we've always made them a part of the greater building.
How conducive are those rooms to kindergarten? Because I know, like, at the regular, you know, they interchange kindergarten and preschool rooms because they've got the bathrooms, and, I mean, is it the same size as a kindergarten room? Would you be able to put the same number of kindergartners in there?
Yeah, it's the same size classroom as we have across the buildings, and the only difference that makes it a more kindergarten-friendly room would be the presence of the restroom in the room. So yes, you could run kindergarten. You could run 5th grade in these classrooms, though, as well, or SLCs. They are as flexible as all of our other classroom space.
Any other questions?
Just real quick, are you prepping your bid documents now, I'm assuming?
My bid documents already, not quite.
Well, you're getting there, because I'm assuming if we go to, we've got to get it out, and we're going to do the same.
The goal right now is that we put these out to bid in September of this year, and if possible, and if we can do this, we still have a lot of utility discussions to have with utilities, but if possible, I do not want to promise things. We may try to move some of those underground utilities that get out of the way to revise those before the kids come back to school, so we're not having to interfere with that. It's just one step that could be, it'll save us money if we can get it done this summer. We just need to get some utility concurrences from both county, Delco Water, and Delaware County Engineers Office.
Assuming the same triangle of players, you two and the really smart one who's not here tonight. Right?
Yes, I think especially,
good.
I mentioned several times that Bill's been...
Well, he's not here, that's why he's really smart.
Invaluable walking through the construction management risk process. I don't think we've used that process here for this, but with the additions in our timeline, having his knowledge can really help keep an eye on the contractors and bring different ones in for the different buildings.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that. So,
2 questions. Will the students lose any outdoor playground space during? Okay.
No.
And my second question is estimated total cost.
Estimated total cost?
I still think it's 13.
So we,
I might have it here.
Yeah, David.
so we have the additions costed out for a total, the 3 additions at $10.5 million. We're estimating about $120,000 in operating costs that would impact the forecast in that 1920 school year.
Total?
Wait, what was that one?
Yes,
120,000.
So it's utilities.
So that is utilities, custodial supplies, and additional custodial staff. The growth for our students is already in the staffing projections, so we're really just looking at additional utilities and supplies to run that square footage. The other piece that we have looked into in terms of the funding to go along with the resolution is the timeline. So in terms of taking the vote to approve the resolution, from that time frame, we should be able to have the bond sold the beginning of August, which would allow then the bidding to occur, because you have to have the funds on hand to do the major bidding for the construction project. And as they said, they are looking in September, so we should be able to meet that timeline should we choose to approve the bond resolution at this meeting.
Okay.
Julia, do you want to see this? This cost.
That was from a couple meetings ago. That's
I have
total.
that.
Okay.
I wanted him to say it.
And so what are we doing? What is our
Sorry, I
program for the
deferred.
playground? You said the playground space would be affected.
Yeah, so we will not be building on any current playground space. It's either green space, or at Allen Creek, there's a kind of an extra drive that goes in front of the one wing that will be built on, but it will not be built on top of any existing playground space. Really, any space that's used during the school day for any reason.
So the student should be pretty unaffected. There'll just be a big construction barrier.
Yeah, we're very committed to minimizing it as much as possible. The site will be safe. Bruce met with the principals to talk about knowing key dates to put in contracts with contractors about avoiding testing days if that were to be a concern, things like that, that could be a distraction for students. and we think we're in a pretty good shape with all of those.
So if if the cost is 10.5, why are we authorizing 14.9?
We are authorizing 14.9 as a means to make sure that we just don't have to come back at any future need. It is a cleaner way to pass the resolution, but again, we do not have to sell the full 14.9 authority.
So in summary, we're giving you the authority to sell that, but in reality, you may not.
We would take the 10.5 to market. Yes.
Any other questions? We've done that before.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I will now entertain a motion to enter into executive session as stated on the agenda for the purpose of preparing for, conducting, or reviewing negotiated or bargaining session with public employees.
Move.
Okay, well, we will return.
Oh, we have to take roll.
Oh, I'm sorry, yep, take
That's
the roll.
okay. Mr. King?
Yes.
Mrs. Fiesel,
Yes.
Mr. Bartz?
Yes.
Mr. O'Brien?
Yes.
And Mrs. Patrick?
Yes.
Thank you.
We will adjourn and
Let's go right to Linda.
Yeah, we'll be right back.
we will be taking action when we return.
Yes.
All right, you stayed.
Well, I knew it was going to be short.
Wait, where's Mr. Spinner?
Oh,
I was
he
like,
spun himself
we're
over
spending a lot of
there.
money for you. You better be here. Absolutely. Okay.
I wanted a better seat.
All right. You want textbooks? You stay. All right, well, I will now entertain a motion for the A through F board action items.
So moved.
A second.
Mrs. Hatfield?
Mr. Bartz?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mrs. Fiesel,
Yes.
Mr. O'Brien?
Yes.
And Mrs. Patrick?
Yes.
Thank you.
Mrs. Hatfield, the treasurer action items, and I believe we are all in agreement on the bond issuance, so we can move forward with that.
We're going to find out here really quick.
Yeah.
Would like to present treasurer action items A through E for approval, please.
So moved.
Second.
Mrs. Fiesel,
Yes.
Mr. O'Brien,
Yes.
Mr. Bartz,
Yes.
Mr. King,
Yes.
and Mrs. Patrick.
That's a yes. Mr. Rafe, your superintendent items?
Yes, ma'am. I'd like to present superintendent action items A through H for approval.
A move.
Second?
Mrs. Hatfield?
Mr. King,
Yes.
Mr. Bartz,
Yes.
Mrs. Fiesel,
Yes.
Mr. O'Brien,
Yes.
and Mrs. Patrick.
Yes. And will Mr. Wright be, oh no,
Mr.
Mr. Meyer
Mr.
will be
Meyer gets
presenting,
this one.
oh, the chief operations officer action item.
Hi there. Yes, I'd like to present action item 13A, approval of supplemental employment for Catherine Rafe as head cross-country coach at Berkshire Middle School and girls assistant basketball coach.
You won't. That's Kevin's job.
So moved.
Second?
Mrs. Hatfield?
Mrs. Fiesel,
Yes.
Mr. Bartz,
Yes.
Mr. King,
Yes.
Mr. O'Brien,
Yes.
and Mrs. Patrick.
Yes. So, Mr. Meyer, did you have to come here tonight just
Just-
because of Catherine Rafe's supplemental?
He's,
It's my pleasure.
he's getting,
Good answer.
he's getting a raise. I mean,
Yeah, that's true. Well, thank you for doing that. And now I will take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
second?
Mrs. Hatfield, call the roll, please.
Mrs. Fiesel,
Yes.
Mr. Bartz,
Yes.
Mr. King,
Yes.
Mr. O'Brien,
Yes.
and Mrs. Patrick.
Yes. Thank you. We are adjourned until we meet here again, at Olentangy High School on the 28th. Thank you for